call to order the regular board meeting of the Vallecitos Water District for May 17th, 2023. And public notice, before I begin this announcement, members of the public may watch the meeting via camera or smartphone by going to the district's website, clicking Watch Live icon. However, they will not be able to participate in the meeting remotely. Members of the public may also listen to the meeting live on their phone by dialing 888-788-0099 toll-free or 877-853-5242 toll-free. When prompt, enter the meeting ID and passcode displayed on the district's website. And now for the Pledge of Allegiance, Cameron Cole and Emma Wilkinson, please step forward.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Thank you, ladies. Roll call. Very good. Thank you very much.
Hello.
I think we're out of order. Are we?
We need to do additions to the agenda.
Yeah, right. And then presentations.
And adopt the agenda.
Yeah, we need to adopt it.
Give us a second.
Cameron, just a second. We'll get right to you. Do we have any additions to the agenda?
We do not.
Seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Please vote. Announce the vote. 4 yeses, 1 abstention. Jim Penick was not here, is absent actually, not abstention. Very good. Thank you. Presentations. General Manager.
I'll say there's no public comment today. So
Yes.
just so we don't get that out. Yeah, so presentations, exciting night tonight. Tonight you're going to hear from our future water leaders. So the board knows Vallecitos supports the Water Resource Management Leadership Program. Last year we kicked it off with La Costa Meadows, and this year Double Peak Elementary joined us. So their test was probably a little bit more challenging because they actually had to cobble together 3 5th grade classrooms, whereas La Costa Meadows was just 1 class. So I'm looking forward to hearing it tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to Cameron.
Yes.
All right, take it away. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to our presentation about the Water Resource Management Leadership Program. We are all 4th and 5th grade students from Double Peak School. We are here to tell you about what we've learned about water on our school campus.
This leadership program has taught us a lot about how we use water on our school campus. Before this, we thought there was only one water system and didn't know about the other water uses. From this program, we learned about the 4 water systems: potable water, wastewater, reclaimed water, and stormwater. We also learned that at school, we mainly use water for hand washing, toilet flushing, and irrigation.
About 70% of our planet is water. 97% of that water is found in the ocean, which we cannot drink. That leaves 3% of fresh water, but 2% of all fresh water is ice that we cannot use, leaving 1% for all humans, animals, and plants to use. 0.9% of fresh water is groundwater, which is expensive to get, and 0.1% is surface water. Only 0.03% of fresh water is found in easily accessible waterways.
We learned how managing waterways all started. A long time ago, people used canals to move water in small towns for their water needs. Over time, these systems advanced. The Romans made aqueducts that moved water over long distances. The aqueducts were tilted down because, as we learned, water always flows downhill. Today, we use water, like aqueducts in California, to maneuver water from farms and cities.
We learned about water management in our community. The red triangles on the map mark the different systems in the water industry. There are lakes, lagoons, and reservoirs all around us. There are systems that bring clean, portable water to us and whisk dirty wastewater away. These systems keep our water and waterways clean and keep us healthy.
We also taught about water agencies. We learned how San Diego County Water Authority sells Vallecitos water that they then sell to Double Peak School. Officials from Vallecitos took our class outside to tell us about the school's water meters. The meters tell us how many units of water we use every month. That also tells Vallecitos how much to charge us.
There are 5 water meters on campus, 2 for potable water in the building and 3 for irrigation. We use about 82 units or 61,336 gallons of water a month in the building. For irrigation, we use 755 units or 564,740 gallons of water each month. We spend about $79,940 on water each year. For comparison, if we use bottled water instead, we would spend $5,171,387 a year.
Our hypothesis was that bottled water would taste the most superior out of the 4 options. Surprisingly, one class thought tap water tasted best. Overall, the teacher lounge water was voted for as the best. The VIPs said that the bottled water and bottle filler tied for best tasting. Interestingly enough, tap water tied for multiple spots, which makes us think tap water tastes better than what we thought. In the end, the activity was a great experience for all of us.
We did a faucet flow test to test how much water comes out of our sink faucets per minute. We put a container under the sink and left the water running for 10 seconds. We knew when 10 seconds were done by using a stopwatch. Then we looked at the marking on the container and wrote down how much water came out.
We tested the sinks in the classrooms and in the bathrooms. There was a surprising difference between the bathroom sinks and the classroom sinks. The water in the classrooms came out a lot faster than in the bathrooms. We think it's because of the aerators they have in the bathroom sinks. So on average, there are 0.75 gallons of water coming out of the sinks per minute. Next, we timed how long students wash their hands so we could see how much water is used. We went to different classrooms across all grades and students volunteered to wash their hands for the data. We timed how long each student washed their hands, used the stopwatch. We used the data from the faucet flow test to do our math.
These are the results from our hand washing data collection. We figured out that there are about 3,600 hand washings each day at our school. We used the number from the flow test to figure out that we use 2,700 gallons of water each day. Each month, we use 56,700 gallons. Out of the potable water coming into the building, we estimated that 72% of this is used for hand washing.
Wastewater is the water that goes down the drain in toilets. Officials from Vallecitos came to our school and showed us how they clean the sewer system. They have big trucks that help clean the pipes by boosting water in it. We also learned how little mobile cameras check the pipe for clogs and broken spots.
These are blue dye tablets that we put in our toilet tanks at home to check for leaks. We left it in there for 12 hours and then checked the bowl for blue water. The majority of our toilets that we tested at home were all clear and had no leaks. If the water was slightly blue, there was a little leak. And if the water was really blue, there was a big leak. Unfortunately, 27% of the toilets in Class A and 35% of toilets in Class B had leaks, and we are planning on fixing them. This will help our parents save money, and now we are going to test the rest of our toilets.
Reclaimed water is cleaned wastewater that is reused for irrigation. It is not drinkable, but it is better to use for irrigation than potable water. We found out that we don't use recycled water on campus. If we used reclaimed water at school instead of potable water, we would save $14,731 a year. This saved money could be used to pay our teachers' raises.
We looked at the irrigation systems at school to see if it was working correctly. We found sprinklers with broken heads. Our system has broken pipes which leak and cause muddy areas. Even though we have sprinklers to water our plants aren't very healthy. Also, like we said, our school uses potable water for irrigation, and leaks cost the school extra money.
We learned about stormwater systems on our campus. Stormwater is clean as it falls from the sky, but when it lands on our campus, it picks up pollutants that flow into the Encinitas Creek, which flows out to the San Alejo Lagoon. To reduce pollution, our school has many different stormwater management features, including storm drains and healthy bioretention basins. We did a walk around our school and assessed our stormwater system. We found that some of our bioretention basins were unhealthy and some of the drains were clogged with trash and plants.
There are a bunch of global issues like climate change and growing population, which can lead to water scarcity, water pollution, and plastic pollution. These problems can lead to animals and humans getting sick. We have found problems over the course of this program. Some of the problems we have found were trash and litter on campus, using plastic water bottles, irrigating with potable water, clogged or dirty storm drains, and leaving the water on while hand washing.
Once we looked at the problems we had on campus, we came up with solutions to fix them. To help the trash problem, picking up trash or even starting a litter campaign would be a great way to keep our campus clean. As for plastic water bottles, students can encourage others to use reusable water bottles to prevent plastic waste. Our school should consider using reclaimed water for irrigation to help save money and use less potable water. To help dirty storm drains, we can pick up trash around them and clear out clogs. To stop wasting as much water when washing our hands, our district can install aerators on the sink faucets in the classrooms, and we will tell the students to turn off the faucets and use soaps when using soap on their hands.
We want to fix all these problems, but we could really use some help from you. Let's bring reclaimed water by installing a pipe that can lead to our school. That would help our school save a ton of money. Donations of trash pickers and buckets will help us with a ton of litter campaign to have a school-wide cleanup. We also found that our lunch area roof collects a lot of water that leads straight to the storm drain. A rain barrel will collect that water to be used for irrigating plants. We think all 4th and 5th grade students in San Marcos should learn about the water value like we did.
We created a water resources management plan for Double Peak that shows what we did at school and what we found. It also has our recommendations for solutions and other ways we can improve our campus. We will be giving our principal and superintendent a copy of this, and we have one for you. This plan also includes our actions of communicating to students and staff about what they can do to solve these problems. We learned a lot in this program, and now we are water leaders for Double Peak.
Thank you to Poseidon Education for teaching us all about water and how we use water at our school. Thank you, Vallecitos Water District, for sponsoring this program, for coming out to teach us, and for letting us present to you today. And thank you to our teachers for bringing the program into our classroom. We learned a lot and now know what it takes to be water leaders at school and in the community.
Excellent. Do we have any questions for the students?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
First, thank you for being here. Thank you for being water leaders. Thank you to your teachers for making this possible. Took a lot of coordination. Thank you to Bill Dean and his staff for leading this and for taking it to Double Peak School. And I'm thrilled that you were able to do it this year. I have a question. You know, it sounds like there could be a lot of water saved if we talked about reclaimed water as an irrigation mechanism at Double Peak. And yes, maybe those dollars could go towards teacher raises. So I'm going to challenge our board to maybe talk about that a little bit more. But it sounds to me like you also have some asks. And I took a picture of what your asks were, and we should talk about those things to figure out how much and how many and who gets them, etc. So thank you. I appreciate you being here.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I have some comments. You know, I've been in the water industry California water, about 37 years, and I learned so much tonight, I had to take notes. So some of the things I learned tonight from you guys was that, you know, tap water doesn't taste too bad after all. You know, I think part of the reason is we're desalinating ocean water. You know, it's more expensive, but it's really reliable, and it really improves the water quality. So I think that's what's going on here. The other thing I learned was that there are some ways to save water. I didn't know that about a third of all the toilets that you surveyed were leaking. That's a big savings if we can fix those, and also the irrigation problems with broken sprinkler heads and pipes. If we can get the school district to fix those, we can save a whole bunch of water there too, and make the plants healthier that they're trying to water. And the last thing I learned was that the stormwater system has these bioretention basins that are protecting our environment. So thank you for sharing that information.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. All of you are really good at presenting, and you knocked it out of the park. And thank you to the parents for taking time out of your day to bring them in. I know that this is important to you as it is to them. And I just want to really share how impactful it is when you come out and give speeches like this. You really are changing the world and making it a better place, and never stop doing that. Always continue to come out and share in the public circle your ideas, what you've learned, and you will make this world a better place, and you already are. So congrats and thank you.
And I would like to add, you all did a wonderful job speaking in front of an audience like this. Takes a little bit of courage, but you did it. And I must add that I'm a public speaker. And one of the things they teach you in public speaking is that do not use and or like or all that. And every one of you did an excellent job, excellent. So keep up the good work, and thank you again. There's some asks, I understand.
Yeah, Anthony, can somebody bring up slide 20? Slide 20. Yeah, this one. So I think there's some things that we can help them with right away. Maybe not tonight, but we'll get on top of it. So I'll start at the second one, the trash pickers and buckets. We can certainly help you with that. Rain barrel or rain tank, I'll work with Chris and we'll make sure we get one for your school. And education, that's great, right? So that's what you're here today, to start that educational process. And we're gonna continue to work with Mr. Dean to make sure all other schools within the San Marcos Unified School District area also get this program. The reclaimed water one's a bit tougher. That would involve laying a lot of pipelines and new connections. It's something we could look at in the future, but that's not something that's gonna happen quickly. But thank you for bringing that to our attention. It's a great idea.
Very good.
Yeah, let's do a group photo.
Photos?
If I can ask the board to come down as well, and all the students, if you can come forward, please.
We all come up here, we'll stand in front of the board members. Unless,
Figure it out, shorter ones in front.
unless the board members are shorter than you guys. Okay. All right, and we're gonna stay in between these, so you can scoot over a little bit over here. Oh, we've got a poster in front, okay. Turn around.
Facing this way.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and the other thing I want you to do is kind of find the window where your face can show through. So find, yeah, you got it. Get yourself, so if you're in one of the back rows, find the window between the other,
Yeah, no, you guys.
the other people's, not right behind their head. Much better.
Okay.
You got everybody that we should in here?
Very good, good.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
Wait a minute.
Mr.
Just a
Dean,
little bit over, yeah.
why don't we let the parents go first?
Yeah.
Go.
Come right here, let's see.
You can scoot up as much as you need to, it's fine. Get that shot. Love the sun. Everybody that wanted one, get one? Yeah. Okay, on three, 1, 2, 3, gritty. We try to back up with my cell phone, because I trust it. And I do. Well, that looks good. On three, 1, 2, 3. Awesome.
Great, great job.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, do I get to keep this?
Oh.
All right. We're gonna put this up in your office. Oh, all right. Or maybe.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
That's awesome. You did an awesome job. Thanks for coming. You're right next to the black one. Yeah.
Or over it.
Thank you. I sent an email.
Okay. Awesome.
Do you have a student in there?
I do.
Yeah,
Yes, I know that.
very good, very good.
He's the one, he's gonna be the only kid left. He might be the only member of the public. He's gonna sit through the meeting. He's gonna learn that one.
Yeah.
notes. It's like, hey,
Pronunciation of that one girl?
Yeah.
It's just on certain.
Yeah, she had words at those points on. And I really think teachers do their kids such a good service to get them up front and make the presentation. It's all different.
Shut doors so that.
Yeah. All right, let us continue. Consent calendar. Anybody wish to pull anything from the consent calendar? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second,
Seconded.
please vote. And it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Action item number 1, adoption of a resolution adopting the memorandum of understanding with the Employees Association covering the general employees units of representation for fiscal year 23, 24, 5, 6, and 7. Do we have anybody to speak on this?
I'll be handling that, but Anthony, if you can bring up the other version of it. All right, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, President Hernandez. So this is the last step in a long process for the negotiations for a successor MOU. So what it is, it's the primary labor relations document that governs the terms and conditions of employment for the majority of our employees here at Vallecitos. It does not specifically pertain to the managers and the confidential employees, which is a group of 10 folks. But you'll notice that there's a subsequent item, the next item on the action items that talks about the managers and confidential employees. The numbers that you're going to see do include the impacts, the financial numbers you're going to see do include the impacts to the managers and confidential employees, the majority of them. So we're at near the end of the current 4-year MOU. It expires June 30th of this year. The Employees Association did submit the first proposal back in January, and we've gone back and forth 3 times between the Employees Association and the district's counter proposals. And the Employees Association did approve the board's latest offer on May 1st. So I'm just going to go through some of the significant modifications. So basically what it says is all terms and conditions of the current MOU continue unless otherwise modified by the successor MOU. So I'll just go over the changes that are proposed. So this year, one of the key items is the cost of living allowance or adjustment. And that's basically to adjust the salaries to keep up with inflation. That's the purpose of a COLA. It'll become effective the first full pay period of July. So July of this year will be the first impact. And it's a reference to the Consumer Price Index for urban customers in San Diego County. And it's a 4-year MOU that's proposed. So in the first year, there's going to be a 5% increase. And I'll talk a little bit more about why it's exactly 5%. That'll take place in July. And then the next 3 subsequent years, these are the maximum amounts that could be increased. It'll be a 5% cost of living adjustment cap in 25, 4% in 26, and 4% in 27. So the MOU also creates what's called a COLA overage bank. And what that means is if the consumer price index actually exceeds the subsequent year's COLA cap, then that difference is placed inside a COLA overage bank. And the CPI that was announced in February of this year was 7.3%. So with a 5% cap, the employees will get 5%, and there will be 2.3% placed into this COLA overage bank. And withdrawals can be made from that COLA overage bank in subsequent years to get the actual COLA as high as up to the cap, if the CPI is less than the subsequent year's COLA. The COLA overage bank balance will never exceed 10%. And when near the end of the MOU, the employees will be eligible to receive up to 50% of the value of that COLA bank as a single one-time lump sum, non-PERSable amount. No guarantee of that. There may be no value to the COLA overage bank at the end, but employees are entitled to 50% of that. And none of those bonuses will be used for retirement calculation purposes. Another item in the MOU was a compensation adjustment. So we did perform a salary compensation adjustment or study back in, I think it was October, November of last year. And this current MOU did require that study to be performed. We compare ourselves to 13 public agencies, 9 are special districts, 4 of them are cities. We didn't look at all of our positions, but we do have 28 benchmark positions. So we looked at those, and other positions that aren't those 28 benchmark positions are tied to those benchmarks for internal equity perspectives. The target amount was 103% of the target of the market mean. So we looked at the market mean and we compared our salaries, and where we were deficient, we made adjustments. The study did determine that on average we were 1.8% behind market. So the MOU does include some adjustments to certain positions, not all of the positions, but there were adjustments to salaries to try to address that differential. And on whole, we got there. We closed that 1.8% gap that we were behind, but that doesn't mean that every position is right on market, but on average. We tried to look at the average going through that. So another item in the MOU are longevity steps. So right now we have a step system, and that means employees start at one step, and then every year they go up a step, and that accompanies with a 5% increase. But once you get to step G, you're frozen there for a 5-year period. And then you get to step H, and you're frozen there for 5 years, and then you get to step I, and that's your highest salary going forward. What the employees asked for is, instead of waiting 5 years to get a 5%, can we do 1%, roughly 1% per year? And the board agreed to that. It doesn't mean that when they reach step H or I, their salary will be higher than it otherwise would have been. So, but they will get intermediate raises instead of having to wait 5 years. Another item was duty compensation. So some of our field operations personnel, they have to pull duty. What it's called is basically you're ready, you're on standby, and you get paid for that, even if you don't get called into work. The current amount is about $35-ish, and employees asked that be increased, and the board agreed to increase that to $50 per duty shift starting in July, and then in subsequent years after that, that $50 per duty shift will be increased by the COLA. Another item in the MOU is exempt employees. These are employees that are exempt from the Fair Labor and Standards Act. So we're reclassifying 4 positions as exempt. They're currently non-exempt, and they will become exempt with the adoption of the MOU. All those positions still remain in the Employees Association, but once you become exempt, you're not eligible for overtime compensation. But you get some more flexibility in your work schedule and as compensation for that. So there are some leave changes proposed in the MOU. 1 additional floating holiday per year per employee, and then 1 additional floating holiday in the 2025-2026 holiday season. So we're proposing that the building be closed on the day after Christmas and the day after New Year's in 25 and 26, and all the employees will get compensated for those days as well. But that's a one-time occurrence within the 4-year MOU. It's not annually. Deferred compensation. So the district currently offers a deferred compensation match. We'll match employee contributions dollar for dollar up to $2,000 per year. This MOU increases that to $3,000 per year. And in recognition of our more recent employees that don't have the same retirement benefits, we're actually proposing that what they're called PEPRA employees, which is the Public Employees Pension Reform Act, those employees will get 2-for-1 matching, not 1-for-1, but it's still capped to the $3,000 per year limit. So fiscal impact of all that, and again, this addresses all the employees, including the confidential and the management, not just the employees in the Employees Association. The additional COLA above, so if we hadn't changed, if the current MOU extended and we were getting 3% per year, these numbers show how much in addition to that 3% per year. So with the COLAs that are specified in fiscal year 2024, we think that'll cost the district an additional $254,000. The compensation study where we adjusted the salaries of certain employees was about $247,000. The additional deferred compensation match, we estimate that'll be about $92,000. That's just an estimate because we don't know to what level employees will participate. The duty pay impacts that I mentioned, that'll be about $27,000 per year, and the longevity pay will cost about an additional $24,000. So the total impact of the MOU above what the current MOU would otherwise result in is about $644,000. So that's like I said, this is the end of the road. There's been a lot of closed sessions and discussions, meeting with the employees, meeting with the board, and this is the MOU that's presented to the board, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do we have any questions? Yes.
Real quick one. On the longevity pay and the 1% steps, is it that they're not actually 1%, they're probably a little bit less in order to,
Yes, yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I didn't want to.
in order to eliminate the compounding?
Yeah, if you looked at
effect?
if you gave 1% per year and you compounded that for 5 years, you'd actually
It's more,
overshoot.
yeah.
You'd be, that cumulatively would be more than 5%. So it's like 0.97%.
Okay.
And if you do the math and you compound that, you'll end up where you would have ended up with a 5%
No change,
one time.
no change in the step
Yeah, so after 5 years, everybody will be where they would have otherwise been.
with 1.5%?
With 1.5%, correct. Yeah, thank you for
Thanks.
asking for that clarification.
Yes.
So we've had a lot of discussion about this MOU, and I'm pleased with where we have arrived. I hope that the employees are happy, and I hope that it continues to attract and retain top talent, which we know is very, very important to keep our water reliable.
Yeah, thank you. So I would say, yes, the employees are happy, they approved it, so that's a good sign, right? Yeah, they were happy with it. Like any negotiation, there's compromises, right? Both sides had to compromise, but I think we ended up in a very good place. And I would like to acknowledge the efforts of Ingrid and Dean and Dennis and Veronica. They were really instrumental, and those were the people that I dealt with most directly, although I did have several all-hands meetings that talk about this, but those four were really instrumental in moving this thing forward.
Yes.
One more, I'd like to thank the employees too. You know, we value them very much, but we have the difficult job of walking that line between the ratepayers' needs and employee retention and satisfaction. So I just want to thank the employees for bearing with us and being patient and getting through this process.
Good, thank you.
Yes, Eric.
Building on my colleagues' thanks for employees, thank you so much for everything that you do, and to the public who is watching this and maybe reflecting on that seemingly large number. I believe it was 3 weeks, maybe four meetings ago, where we had a realization of cost savings in a program that was done by the employees that saved several millions of dollars. So to Director Boyd Hodgson's point, attracting and retaining the top talent ends up in a net savings for the ratepayer at the end of the day. And I too am happy with where this ended, and that everyone came together and made a very collaborative and good effort towards pushing the district forward on a very positive note.
And I would add to that point, it's a very competitive market out there, and all the other water districts are looking to steal good people. And I want to keep the best and the brightest here, and I'll toot the horn of all the employees again. We have the third lowest water rates in the county, and we have the highest cost of imported water because of our commitment to desal. So to be at the third lowest rates in the county is amazing, and it's through the efforts of all of our employees.
Yes. I too would like to thank the employees and the groups that helped get us here. So keep up the good work. We are a gold standard in the industry, so I appreciate that and happy to continue that. Right. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the memorandum of understanding.
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Please vote. And it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 2.2, establish the terms and conditions for the employees, for management and confidential employees.
Yeah, so thank you, President Hernandez. I'll take that item as well. So this is a companion item. This addresses the 10 positions that weren't directly covered by the Employees Association MOU. So as soon as Anthony brings this up, I'll jump in.
Very good. Any questions on this?
We have a little bit of a
Presentation.
presentation. I'm just waiting for this to be
Okay.
shared, and then I'll walk you through it. It's a really brief presentation. All right, so again, the MOU is the kind of the governing document for labor relations, but it does not pertain to the management and confidential employees. Same thing we said, so the board did just approve the MOU. So the important thing is that the unrepresented management group did submit additional benefit items for the board's consideration. So those positions, there's 4 positions that are included. That's the assistant general manager, the district engineer, the O&M manager, the chief financial officer, and the human resources / risk manager. Does not include myself. I have an employment agreement, so all my terms and conditions are covered under my agreement, so it does not pertain to me. So the most important thing that the resolution that's in front of the board does is it basically says that the managers and confidential employees will receive the same benefits outlined in the MOU that the board just approved. So everything will be the same, with the exception that the management group will receive the following benefits for the term of the MOU. So these are over and above what was stated in the MOU. So 3 items. The first is an additional annual deferred compensation match of $1,500. So you remember you just approved an item that each employee gets up to $3,000 match. This will increase the deferred comp match for management employees to $4,500 per year. Management employees, the 5 that I mentioned, will be eligible to participate in a healthcare reimbursement arrangement. It's something similar to what I have. It's really no cost to the district because it's funded by, it's not really the employees' own funds. It's actually district money, but it's money that they would have had. For example, we would have given it to them in terms of a vacation accrual. So instead of receiving vacation accrual, they can divert it into a health retirement arrangement, a health reimbursement arrangement. So really no cost to the district there. And the last item is an automobile allowance, which is pretty typical, pretty common in our industry. And the board approved, discussed approving an allowance of $300 per month. But if an employee happens to have an all-electric vehicle, they'll receive an additional $100 per month for a total of $400 per month. It says subject to certain conditions. They have to demonstrate that they actually do own an electric vehicle and they use it to come to work and that type of thing. So, but I believe most employees or most managers that have an electric vehicle will be able to meet those conditions. So the fiscal impact, and this is over and above the numbers that you saw in the last presentation. This is just for the additional asks for the managers. The additional deferred compensation, $7,500 per year. That's 5 managers at $1,500 additional per year. No cost for the healthcare reimbursement agreement. And the automobile allowance, we estimate about $19,200. That's just assuming one of the 5 managers has an electric vehicle. So that's how we came up with that number. So the total impact is $26,700 in fiscal year '24. And that's it. And just as a reminder, all of the other terms and conditions contained within the MOU apply to the management and confidential employees. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Yes.
Is this the first time that we've had an MOU for a separate MOU for the managers?
Yeah, so it's technically not an MOU, it's a resolution, because
okay.
you can only have MOUs with the recognized bargaining groups, and they're not a defined bargaining group.
Okay.
So they're not covered under the Employees Association. So the resolution basically defines their terms. And the most common way we've done in the past is we basically say, this group gets the same as that group by resolution. It may happen in the future that different groups form formal bargaining groups, and then you would probably have an MOU per bargaining group. And I'll look to Mr. Gilpin if he wants to add anything to that. That's pretty good, yeah. So this is the first time, well, I wouldn't say it's the first time we've done a resolution. We've done it in years past just to say the managers get the same. This is the first time that there's been benefits over and above what were included in the MOU for the managers group.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Thank you for your organizing efforts, bringing and advocating for what sounds like industry standard, and I'm happy with where we arrived at this point. Also, I would also like to just thank you, Glenn, for being sort of the not the negotiator, but the go-between. I know that's a hard position to be in, and we did have quite a lot of back and forth with both the Employee Association MOU as well as this resolution, and I wanted to just acknowledge your efforts, and you handled that very well, very professional, and I'm grateful.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and it's an interesting role. Yeah, depending which group you're meeting with, you have to turn your hat slightly. So,
Any other questions? Entertain a motion to adopt the resolution for the conditioned employees and management.
I'll make that motion.
And a second?
A second.
Please vote. And it passes unanimously. Moving on to item 2.3, the Vallecitos Water District draft proposed fiscal year budget.
so I'll jump in and kick this off, President Hernandez, and then I'll turn it over to Wes. This is the penultimate budget presentation before the proposed adoption on June 7th. My wife likes when I throw useless words out there. So, reminder, a couple of cautions. Staff is still making minor revisions. It's still a work in progress, right? Today, we're going to be focusing on changes from the last presentation, which was just 2 weeks ago. Any new information that we received, and you'll hear that we received some new information just yesterday at the Water Authority we're trying to incorporate into here. And any issues or questions that were raised by the board members, we certainly want to present any updated information and get more feedback from the board members. So, as a reminder, the budget contains information for multiple years, or the presentation contains information for multiple years, but on June 7th, you'll only be asked to approve a budget for 1 year. It's the FY24 budget that will be presented in front of you. And I want to stress, before I turn it over to Wes, that we are not setting rates in conjunction with this budget process, right? They're different processes. One influences the other, but it doesn't predetermine anything. So the budget does include certain assumptions on future rates for both water and wastewater. So the budget will look at expenses, it'll also look at revenues. So we always make assumptions, what do we think rate increases may be in the future. It does not tie the board's hands. You can do whatever you think you need to do at the time that we'll do any rate setting. So don't think that consideration of a budget is determining the rates. And when we do come forward with rates later in the year, our proposed rates, you'll get updated financial information. What you're looking at right now is we're doing the best we can with our crystal ball, right? But as time passes and maybe another 6 months goes by, we can refine that crystal ball and polish it up, and we'll have better information to give the board for ultimate rate setting. And it's a budget is just a planning document. It's our best guess, our best estimate of what our expenses and revenues will be, but there's a lot of factors. I think we do a really good job at the staff level of giving the board good budgetary information. You've seen previous presentations where we talk about our budget to actual, and we're usually pretty close. We're sailing into some pretty strong headwinds, though. There'll be some, when you look at what may be happening with the Water Authority rates and the changes in consumption patterns, it makes it tougher and tougher to predict, but we'll always do the best that we can to give the board the best information to act on. So unless the board has any questions of me, I will turn the presentation over to Mr. Owen.
Very good.
Wes, take it away. And notice the hardware that Wes is wearing. Wes, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll get there.
You'll get there, okay.
I'll get
Yeah,
there.
all right.
Yeah. You notice what color that is?
It's gold.
Yes. Okay, good evening, President Hernandez, members of the board. Welcome to the fourth and hopefully the second to last budget meeting tonight. Not that we don't like, presenting on the budget and doing the work, but, getting it finished it feels like an accomplishment. It's kind of like winning a triathlon. First place in the spring sprint triathlon here in Mission Bay.
Wow.
Really?
On May 7th.
And Matthias won second place.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Matthias and I did it together and trained together. We only trained for about a month, but we trained pretty well and came in first and second place.
No kidding. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations. That's a big deal.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, if you look at we did the 16 through 99 age group for the mini sprint. If you add in the total age range from 0 to 99, the males, I came in second place. A 13-year-old named, I think his name is Wiley, he beat me. He beat me by a couple minutes, actually. He was fast.
Wow.
I'll be looking for him next year when he's 14, though.
So why didn't you ask for like a fitness provision in the,
Yeah, there you go.
in the MOU, I guess? Like,
We
maybe
do.
we'll be
We do have some wellness funds budgeted, I think, so we'll have to take a look at that. Maybe we have to raise those so I can beat him next year.
May I ask, what are distances and the time, what are the events?
So yeah, unfortunately, a friend of mine would laugh at me when I say this, but I have a friend who's an Ironman. She did a half Ironman recently, and I watched her finish that. It kind of motivated me to get back into doing triathlons. But the mini sprint is once a year in May. The swim is a 200-yard swim, so it's about an eighth of a mile. Then we do a 6-mile bike ride, and then we do a mile and a half run at the end of it. So it's all doable. We finished in 43 minutes.
Oh, wow.
It's just a lot of fun. It's a social event, a lot of support there, and we had a really good time.
It truly is a sprint.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So back to the budget, less important things. So this is the second to last meeting. Hopefully we'll be bringing the budget to the board for approval on June 7th. Tonight's presentation will be very similar to the one you saw on the 3rd. It should be shorter. Last time we did this last year, we did it in, I think it was 35 minutes or so, so we'll try to beat that. We've got to beat our previous time, just like in a triathlon.
Well, we have an 11-year-old here, so maybe they can.
Oh, okay.
They can motivate, right? 'Cause-
I'm not going to race. He'll beat me.
Yeah, right.
And as you know, staff is always refining and revising the budget. So tonight we're actually going to go through some of the changes that were made between the draft budget and now the draft proposed budget. So the agenda for tonight, and this is a full-page agenda. First, we're going to go over the budget process and calendar. After that, we'll talk about the changes from the draft budget to the draft proposed. Then we'll go over the operating expenses for both water and sewer. After that, we'll talk about the salaries and benefits. Then Mike will present on the water sales, purchases, and sewer revenue. After that, we'll talk about the capital budget. Then we'll go through the reserve balances and some of our rating criteria. And then finally, the next steps in the budget process. So starting off the budget process and calendar, and we got a little bit of a different format this time. Hopefully the entire presentation will be in at least a different format for you, maybe abbreviated a little bit so it'll be a little more exciting, not so many numbers. But the internal process for the budget calendar, in February we update the audit actuals and start working on the projections. And then the departments submit their requests for expense requests. Then in March, we compile the operating budget and we finish up the 2023 projections and we begin work on the payroll estimates. On March 17th, we had our first finance committee meeting. At that meeting, we talked about the budget calendar and went over the budget versus actual for the last 5 years. Then in April, we incorporated the operating budget. We started preparing the draft capital budget and we started compiling the actual draft budget in total. Management and staff did that. And then on April 11th, we had our second Finance Committee meeting. At that meeting, we talked about the preliminary salaries and benefits. We reviewed all the operating budget requests and all of the capital budget requests. Then in May, we've now put together the draft budget, and that's been reviewed by management and staff and was presented to the board on May 3rd. And now at this meeting, we're going over the draft proposed budget, which is just changes made from the draft budget. In June, we will incorporate any requested items and changes from this meeting. We'll revise and refine it further, continue our quality control. And then on June 7th, we'll bring you the best possible budget, hopefully for approval. And then cross the finish line, just like this guy. I should have put a gold medal around his neck for that one. So moving on, the changes from the draft budget. So since May 3rd, we've been going through doing quality control, looking at the budget, and one of the biggest things that we actually got some information from Aqua JPIA, and they've told us that they're expecting double-digit increases in all of their plans for the next year or two. So we've put that into the draft proposed budget, and there's about a $111,000 increase in group insurance for fiscal year 2024. We've added 2 new reclasses to positions. We looked at some positions, and a couple of them had some equity issues with the scope of their positions and their comparison to other jobs. So part of that was done through the class and comp. So the impact of those 2 reclasses, it's on page 32 of the draft proposed budget, and the impact is $15,000 a year. And then we also found a math error. I know it sounds impossible, but we did. We made a math error. We found one and we corrected it, and the result of that was a $22,000 increase in salaries and benefits. And then the capital changes. We removed one of the projects from the future projects, and remember, future projects are projects that will be worked on in the future, but not this year. But in looking at that, it was determined that this project would be put on hold for now. So we removed it from the future projects, and that resulted in a $4.4 million decrease in the capital budget. And then we corrected the budget for the no-des and actually discussed this at the last meeting. We had $560,000 budgeted for the no-des potable water main flushing trailer in vehicles and equipment. We've actually already paid for half of that, so we took out the $280,000 that was included in that, so that reduced the budget by $280,000 in vehicles and equipment. So those are the changes from the draft. Now we're going to move on to the operating expenses.
Sure. Should I ask a question now, or?
Yeah, sure.
It looks like, you removed, can you just go back to the previous slide? So the removal of the Mission Road, North County Transit District, Caltrans sewer replacement project, how did you choose that one to remove?
That's a good question. I will defer that to Jason because he gave me an email shortly after the presentation and said, we can put this one on hold.
Yeah, so we always evaluate different projects and their priorities, and that's a project that, am I on or? You're off. Sorry, red, green, I always get that wrong. So anyways, we look at these projects and just say, how feasible is it based on the capacity and the actual need of the project that we're actually going to get to it in that future time frame. That future time frame, really look in the next 5 years. After that time frame, so this project still exists, it's just not going to be tackled in the next 5 years.
Understood, thank you.
Okay, so moving on to operating expenses. So this slide is from page 2 of the draft proposed budget and shows the total budget for fiscal year 2024. And as General Manager Pruitt mentioned, on June 7th, when we bring the budget forward for approval, the board will be looking at approving a one-year budget, and the total of that one-year budget is $103.8 million. So that's for everything for fiscal year 2024. Looking at this chart, the top half of the chart is actually, those are reserve funded amounts. Those are for debt service, vehicles, equipment, and capital projects. Those will be talked about towards the end of the presentation. So first I'm going to talk about the operating expenses. And we'll start with water operations, which is $14.3 million, or 14% of the total budget. So this next slide is page 11 of the draft proposed budget and breaks down the water operating expenses. And the total for fiscal year 2024 is $51.2 million. And as we talked about before, but it's still very important, $36.9 million of the water operating budget is for water purchases. So when the Water Authority raises their rates, as we know, they're talking about doing in potential double digits, it really impacts our budget and our rates to our customers. So looking at the rest of the operating expenses, this is an abbreviated slide of page 11 of the draft proposed budget, and I've basically just rolled up all the departments. The operations department consists of pumping through backflow. I just summed them all together for operations. Support is customer service through IT, and that's so the sum of those departments on page 11. And looking at this analytically, we can see that the total budget operating expenses, it's budgeted increased by $3.5 million. The majority of that increase is due to water purchases, and water purchases budgeted increased by $2.5 million. And I won't take Mike's thunder on that one. He's going to discuss that later. But the major other increases are that operations are budgeted increased by $391,000. The majority of that is due to increases in salaries and benefits. We have increases in transmission and distribution of $130,000, water treatment of $122,000, and tanks and reservoirs of $75,000 that make up the majority of that difference.
Question here. Does that include the latest MOU that was just presented?
Yes.
Thank you.
So moving on, that was water operations. If there are no questions there, I'll move on to sewer. So sewer operations are $15.2 million, or 15% of the total budget. And the sewer operating expenses are summarized here, and this is on page 20 of the draft proposed budget. And we can see the majority of the sewer operating expenses, or 45%, which is $6.9 million, is for treatment costs. Those are costs from Encina and costs from the Metal Arc plant. So looking at sewer operating expenses, this is again a summary of page 21 of the draft proposed budget. So the departments are just rolled up in the same designations. We got operations and support rolled up. And looking at it analytically, the expenses are budgeted to increase by $995,000 in total. And the majority of that is for treatment. And again, that's Encina and the Metal Arc treatment plant. Encina's got an increase in their budget of $431,000 for the year. So that's the majority of that increase there. The rest would be the plant. And then support is budgeted to increase by $222,000. And we talked a little bit about this at the May 3rd meeting. That's as a result of increases in outside services and IT. We have a SCADA contract of about $71,000 for SCADA support. And then we have engineering temporary agency services and blue water costs of $60,000.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
The, on the previous slide, the 27%, the 27% of operation and maintenance, and I apologize, you've probably gone over this, but I can't remember. How much of that is SDG&E or electricity-related costs?
That would be a good question. I'd have to put that together. We'd have to look at if you look at pages 21 through 24, each department has a power cost under their department. So
Okay.
I'd have to add those up and sort of divide that by the total to get that number for you.
Okay, but it's significant. I mean, the electricity component of how we treat
Yep.
wastewater is a big expense.
Especially at the plant, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so moving on. That was the end of sewer, so now we're gonna move on to salaries and benefits, and this is where you'll see the effects of the MOU, which you just asked about. So in total, salaries and benefits is budgeted to increase by $1.1 million, or 10.1%. And the major reasons for that are the memorandum of understanding that was just approved by the board. In that, there was an increase of $759,000 for salaries. Then we have normal steps that are included in this as well. There are 49 people scheduled to get normal steps, which is about $116,000 increase to salaries. And then you have a new position that's being proposed, and that's the assistant operations manager. The effect on salary is an increase of $156,000 for that position. So that makes up the $1.1 million increase in salaries. Benefits are budgeted to increase by $160,000. The major reason for that is that group insurance is budgeted to increase by $336,000, and again, that's because of the double-digit increases in costs from Aqua JPIA for the year. And also worth noting that PERS is decreasing by $404,000. I know we touched on this in the last meeting as well, but that is a direct result of the district paying down the unfunded accrued liability with PERS. This year, there's no payment on that unfunded accrued liability, which resulted in savings of $404,000 total from previous year. And actually, the savings is $1.8 million because that's what we would have paid on the normal liability, but year to year, it's a $400,000 comparison. In total, salaries and benefits is budgeted to increase by $1.3 million, or 7.5% for the year. So the next slide, that's enough numbers. We'll get into the colors now. So I've presented this as the third time you've seen it, I know, but it's colorful and exciting, so just jump around a little bit. But this shows budget to actual for salaries for the last 5 years. That's the bottom half of the chart, and we can see the top half is budget to actual for benefits for the last 5 years. And really what we can see here is that we've really been able to keep salaries and benefits steady over the last 5 years, despite the fact that we're increasing our population, increasing our operations and all of our needs. We've been able to maintain pretty steady salaries and benefits. And actually, we've done a decent job in budgeting as well. We've been, the budget to actual, 2.4% was the biggest difference we've had in the last 5 years, so I think that's pretty good. So that's salaries and benefits. Next, I actually get to pass the baton on to Mike, and he's going to talk about water purchases, sales, and sewer revenue.
Thank you, Wes. President Hernandez, members of the board. So as General Manager Peroma alluded to earlier, the Water Authority had a meeting yesterday to talk about rates. They're still not finalized yet, so there's a lot of things still going on with them. But the latest information is that their wholesale increases passed on to member agencies is going to be anywhere from 10 to 13.4%. In our budget, we've estimated 10%, which is what we're hoping they would do. However, if the Water Authority were to pass through a 13.4% increase, that would mean an approximately additional $825,000 hit to Vallecitos. So that is not currently in the budget. Like I said, we are estimating 10%. If they go with 10%, our budget is in line with that. Anything over than that then would be an additional withdrawal from our reserves.
I have a question.
Yes.
I know that a few meetings past, we passed a resolution to enact a cap that we can, by which we can increase rates. Why are we budgeting for a 10% increase in water when, and I know it's not one-to-one, but this is a primary driver of what we charge our customers. So why would we budget at a 10% rate when we know that we are not going to be, that we have a cap?
So I'll take a shot at that. So we have to talk about revenues and expenses. So the 10% that Mike's talking about on the expense side, what we thought we would pay to the water authority, we budgeted 10% increase. On the revenue side, that's where the Prop 218 limitation of the 6.5% comes in. So we did factor in the limitations on the revenue side, but the information on Mike's slide here about 10 to 13.4% is on the expense side.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, it's the next bullet, so it's
Oh.
perfect timing.
Great.
So, the water rate increase with the pass-through charges, as you just mentioned, is about 6.5%, and is built into the budget. However, the next bullet will tell you that if there was no limit, if we could pass through the entire 10 or 13.4%, but in this case 10%, the district would be able to realize an additional $992,000. So really what the Prop 218 did, it's limited our revenue by $992,000, therefore the end customer is actually benefiting from that right now because we're pulling it out of reserves. Okay, this is a new slide that I showed last 2 weeks ago, but it's the first time we saw it. I just wanted to reiterate this, that we've always talked about the mix of water purchases versus our total budget. And in previous years, we've always talked about a 70-30 split. And that was true up until the last couple of years, and now it's projected, right now we're at about 72%, and in a couple of years we're projected to go almost 3/4 of our budget will be purchased water. So I'll go through this a little bit quicker. None of these numbers have changed from the last time we presented. So our estimate for this year is about 32 for water costs, including water, the sales, revenue. The sales ready to serve and pumping recovery is about 32.4 million. It's projected to go to 36 million. The big difference in that is, as you know, we've had these torrential rains the last couple of years. Real quick, the Water Authority did a presentation yesterday. They mentioned how last year or this year, the rainfall is about 150, I think it was 158% of normal. And the last time it was that high was 2005. So we're not, and they've also mentioned that there has never been, at least in the last 20 years, back-to-back rains like that. So what we're doing is we're projecting kind of going back to normalcy. So that's why there's a big increase. It looks like a huge increase, but that's because there's a dip this year, specifically because of the rain, and going back to normal for next year. So for our costs, as you know, we have the desal water, we have a contract with OMWD, our remainder water from SDCWA, and an additional desal water. These costs are slightly different than what's on this slide, but the total cost is the same. When when the Water Authority gave us our numbers, the commodity costs are a little bit higher than this, a little bit higher than that 1688, but the fixed amount is offset by almost the same amount. So the total amount is 36,900,000, which you just saw in that previous slide. So again, what I like to do too is do kind of an estimate if we were to have another wet year, what does that mean? If we were to have an increase, a whole new community comes on, there's nothing major planned that I see, but if something were to come on and we were to sell 10% more water, what does that mean? And these numbers, the left number is the demand increase or decrease, the right side is the net hit to our reserves. So that takes the additional revenue, subtracts out any additional costs to come up with a net amount. So this is the amount that would hit our reserves. So real quick, a 10% decrease in demand of what we projected in the budget would be a hit of about $1.5 million to the reserves. And conversely, a 10% increase in demand would be about a 1.6 net positive to our reserves. And then lastly, we have our sewer service. This year, Wes, we did not project the rate increase, correct? Right. So this coming fiscal year, 23-24, there are no projected rate increases for sewer. So the sewer service and the reclaimed water sales and everything else would be basically flat. I think in future years we have about a 2.5% increase built into the sewer. And that is it on my presentation. So unless there's any other questions, I'll turn it back over to Wes.
Any other questions? Okay, Wes.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, so back to the home page. Again, page 2 of the budget. Next, we're going to the capital section or the reserve funded sections of the chart. And we can see here that the 1-year capital budget, so this is the amount that we'll be bringing forward for approval on June 7th, is $30.3 million for capital expenditures. That's 29% of the total budget. The 10-year projection, which we use for our financial planning purposes, is $137 million. It's 137.5 exactly, and or 137.4, which is slightly down from 137.5 last year, so it's down about $100,000. And don't let me forget to talk about the investment earnings towards the end of the reserve projections, because we do have some stuff I just wanted to mention about that. I was going to talk about it at the beginning, but we'll get there. So moving on to capital, here's a summary of pages 35 and pages 118. Page 35 and 36 are the detailed capital expenditures. So this summarizes that at the top. The bottom are the vehicles and equipment, which are on page 118 of the draft proposed budget. At the top, we can see that the total 10-year capital budget is $137.4 million, which is made up of carryover capital improvement projects. Carryover projects are projects that were budgeted for in previous years that have been carried over to this year. They could be multi-year projects, or they just weren't finished and needed to be carried over. We also have $60.5 million in new CIP requests. Those are new requests for existing carryover projects, as well as new requests for new projects. And finally, we have the $20.7 million for future CIP requests. Future CIP requests are future projects that we worked on, not this year, but in future years, and we put those in there for financial planning purposes so we can do our 5- and 10-year plans. What I did want to notice to the right, you'll see new CIP requests actually increased by $7.2 million, while the future requests decreased by $8.2. That's pretty much what we'd expect to see as future projects become current projects or new projects. You see an increase in the new projects and a decrease in the future projects. So next, we'll talk about vehicles and equipment, and that's budgeted to increase, or actually budgeted to be $1.6 million. And that is made up of about $860,000 in carryover vehicles and equipment, so just vehicles and equipment we weren't able to purchase or procure this year that were budgeted for this year, so we carried them forward to 2024. And $719,000 in new requests for vehicles and equipment.
Question. It came up at the conference that our good friends at Valley Center are stocking up on vehicles, gas vehicles, for the change that is due in 27. Half the fleet has to be, what?
24.
24? Oh, half the fleet has to be electric vehicles. Valley Center has purchased a dozen vehicles now, and so they don't have to, they got 15-year life, so they don't have to worry about that. Have we considered doing anything like that?
Yeah, so what you see is we're not trying to pre-purchase vehicles or accelerate our replacement. We don't want to delay it, though. We're not trying to slow it down in order to wait for electric vehicles to become available. We're buying the vehicles that we need at the time we feel we need them. We've had difficulty getting vehicles over the last several years. The whole supply chain issues and vehicle availability due to COVID restrictions has been difficult. That's why you see that almost $900,000 carry forward on vehicles. So we're still moving forward buying the vehicles at the pace that we predict that we need them, irrespective of the change in electrification laws. And I don't know if Ed or somebody wants to add to that.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say.
All right, thank you.
So that's the capital budget summary. Moving on now, and in total, the capital budget and vehicles and equipment is budgeted to decrease by $500,000, mainly as a result of decrease in the vehicles and equipment. And here is a picture of the capital projects by function over the next 5 years, and we can see in fiscal year 2024, of the total $30.3 million, $8.2 million is for water projects, $22.1 million is for sewer projects, and of that, $5.5 million are for Encina projects. If we look at the 10-year total, the 10-year total is $137.4 million, and of that, in the top right, you can see 101.9 are for sewer projects, and of that 101.9, 30.1 are for Encina projects that we have budgeted. So this next slide, now that we have the operating expenses, the salaries and benefits, and all the capital budget done, all that was put together, and it all rolls up and actually gets us to our reserve projections, and this is how we develop our 5-year plan. I know it's a lot of numbers, but this is what the rating agencies come and look at, and they say, okay, you have your reserve levels are within policy limits, you have sufficient reserves, you have sufficient days in cash, and you have a good debt service coverage. They look at all these things, as well as our customer base and rates and other things, but they look at this, and that's how they determine whether we get to keep our AA+ rating, or they upgrade it, or we get downgraded. So just to walk you through how this works, there's actually a summary of pages 121 through 125. we start with our projected beginning balance in 2024. From there, we add in our operating transfers, and that's just the excess of revenues over expenses for water and sewer operating expenses. So if we have more revenue than expenses, anything that we have in excess gets transferred into reserves. From there, you have our non-operating revenues like our capital facility fees, property taxes, RDA pass-throughs, debt proceeds, any project reimbursements, and any investment earnings. And this is where the investment earnings kind of come into play because they affect our reserve levels. They would, in effect, sort of affect our rates if, so if we had more investment earnings than we have here, it could decrease the amount we need for rates by decreasing the amount we need to transfer into reserves. But looking at that, because of the situation with the Water Authority, it would take an awful lot of differences in investment earnings. Not that we wouldn't do it anyway. It's obviously good to earn as much as you can on investments. But with the drawdown of reserves in the next couple of years from the Water Authority, no matter what we project in the budget, it's probably not going to affect our rate projections in the budget document. That's aside from what we'll do with investments, which we will talk about at the June 7th meeting anyway. But considering that, that's the effect investment earnings would have on rates. Next, from there, we subtract out the capital project cost, the $30.3 million, then the vehicles and equipment and the debt service to get to our ending reserve balance, and that's the ending reserve balance for fiscal year 2024, which is $101.6 million. So we project that out for 5 years, and we take a look at how our days in cash and our debt service coverage ratios are based on that. So it all leads up to this and tells us what our days in cash and debt service is. And you can see that in fiscal year 2024, days in cash is projected at 545 days. And our debt service coverage is 411%. Our bond covenants require us to have 115% debt service coverage, so we're well above that this year and in the outer 4 years. So you can see 439 for days in cash, 380. By the end of the 5th year, it goes down to 358 days in cash and 407% in debt service coverage. So still well above the required minimums to maintain our credit rating. So looking further at the reserve balances and looking at it in a picture format, here are the reserve balances historically for water and sewer. And we can see over the last 5 years, reserve balances have been increasing, and they increased in 21-22 by about $12.6 million for sewer and $15.8 for water. That was a result of the debt issuance that we had in 2022. It was August of 21, but fiscal year 2022. So we brought in that cash infusion from the debt proceeds. As we spend that money, you can see that it's coming down in fiscal year 2024. So those are the historical reserve balances. Now we'll look at the projected reserve balances. So water replacement reserves. The reserve policy states that we will maintain 6 months of operating expenses plus 3 years of projected system replacement costs as our floor for our reserves. So that's the minimum amount that we can have for our floor and reserves. And for water replacement, that amount is $20 million for fiscal year 2024, and it goes up to $23 million by 2028. Our ceiling is 6 months of operating expenses plus 10 years of projected system replacement costs. And the ceiling, the most we can have in our water replacement reserves is $56 million in 2024, and that amount goes up to $62 million by fiscal year 2028. So that's our floor and our ceiling based on our reserve policy, so those are our policy limits. So now looking at our financial plan and where our reserve balances are forecasted to be, we can see that in 2024, we're projected to have $39 million in water replacement reserves. By 2028, that number comes down to $25 million. It's still above the floor and within policy limits, so those are both good. So water reserves in total, so now we're just incorporating the capacity fund just to get a picture of our total reserves. And we can see with capacity reserves that in 2024, reserves are projected to be $44 million. And by 2028, they'll be $31 million, which is well above the floor and within policy limits. So that's water. Looking at sewer, sewer's got the same exact floor as water, 6 months of operating expenses plus 3 years of projected system replacement costs. But the ceiling is a little different. It has 6 months of operating expenses and 8 years of projected system replacement costs because sewer assets age faster and need to be replaced quicker. So we use 8 years. But in 2024, the floor is $32 million and the ceiling is $86 million. By 2028, the floor will be $41 million and the ceiling will be $92 million for sewer replacement. Now looking at our 5-year projection for sewer replacement balances, we're projected to have $51 million in sewer replacement for fiscal year 2024 at the end of the year. And by 2028, as a result of our project costs and everything else, it will be at $46 million, which is $5 million above the floor of $41 million and within policy limits. Next, we'll incorporate the capacity fund. So just taking a look at that. Total reserves for wastewater are projected to be $58 million by the end of fiscal year 2024. And by 2028, they'll be at $54 million in our 5-year financial plan. And again, above our floor and within policy limits. So those are some of the things the rating agencies are going to look at. Next, we'll go into 2 other very important criteria. First, we'll answer questions.
Yeah, it might be helpful to show each of the reserves separately and then they combine, like the capacity reserve by itself.
Sure. Yeah, I have all those charts. I just thought if I put in too many, we're going to be going through a lot of them.
Yeah, because that's kind of driven by, I mean, we borrowed money, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so capacity is funded by developer fees and debt only, so
Right.
it's not affected, it doesn't affect rates.
Right.
So we really like to stress the replacement and then just show the capacity incorporated. But we have those balances and I can put them in. I can put them in this presentation and abbreviate it for the next one.
Okay.
Yeah, 100% of that $28 million we borrowed was for capacity projects.
Right. I mean, I think for the public, it'd be good to show that there's no impact to rates for that particular reserve.
Yeah, so the first 2 charts we showed for water replacement and then wastewater replacement, those are the ones that we are going to use to impact rates. The capacity is not included in those.
Thanks.
So moving on to 2 other important criteria, days in cash. This is always a fun one. Here we can see days in cash historically. So in 2024, the district is projected to have 545 days in cash. And you can see the orange line is actually the Fitch AA+ median rating for water and sewer agencies and their retail agencies, so like us. That line is actually trending up, so it seems that the other water and sewer agencies are accumulating cash and holding on to it. So it's at 571 days right now. We'll be projected to be 545 and then down to 358 by 2028. One thing I did want to point out is that in 2021-22, it went up to 713 and then down to 675. That was a result of the cash infusion from the debt proceeds. So as cash came in, our days in cash increased. But in looking at that, even though it's going down to 358 days by 2028, we believe that combined with our other rating criteria, such as our debt service coverage, our reserve levels, our revenue defensibility and low operating risk profile, things that the rating agencies look at, we'll be able to maintain our credit rating. And with that, the district actually has a AA+ credit rating, which we first got, we were upgraded in 2013. Since then, we have had 6 surveillances on that rating. So Fitch and S&P come out, they ask us for all kinds of information. We feed it to them, and they say, okay, can you still keep your AA+ rating? And over those, through those 6 surveillances, we've maintained our AA+ rating. And actually in the most recent one, which was done during the debt issuance, they came out and said we went from a AA+ stable to a AA+ positive, which means we're on the upswing for the rating, hopefully. So we're shooting to get better with our rating, whenever we can, and AA+ positive is a good indication for us. It is tough with everything going on in the economy right now, but hopefully we can keep with our good financial planning and see if we can get a AAA rating. So the next thing I wanted to show, and this is actually a new slide in this presentation, this is our debt service by issue. So this is our total debt. So another thing you look at is our debt service costs, and we say that our debt service coverage and those. So I wanted to show what our debt profile looks like. So here we can see we have 3 debt issuances. We have the 2008 loan, and that's with Union Bank, actually US Bank now. We have a 2015 certificate of participation, COPS they call it, Series A. That's the orange line, the orange bars. And then we have our new debt, which was also a certificate of participation, Series A for 2021. That's the blue bar at the top. Another thing I wanted to point out is that by 2028, the 2008 loan will be paid off. So actually our debt service will be reduced by a little over almost $500,000. At that point, we'll go down from $5.4 million a year down to $4.9 million a year. And then the 2015 will be paid off by 2035. At that time, we will just have the 2021 left, and our debt service will be approximately $1.2 million, just assuming we don't issue any other debt by that time.
Yes.
Can you remind me of the interest rates on these?
Yep. So the 2008 loan is a variable loan. It's based on SOFR right now. We actually just went through transitioning from, what's it called? LIBOR, yes. Thank you. LIBOR to SOFR. It's about the same rate, and that currently is around 4.2%. The 2015 Series A, it's about a 5% interest. We refunded that in 15. Those aren't callable till 2025, so we wouldn't be able to refund those or refinance them again until 2025. Otherwise, we would have looked at it we actually did consider it during the process, but the cost ended up about the same. We wouldn't be able to do anything with the debt until we got to, I think it was 2025 or 26 anyway. So that wasn't beneficial. But the 2021 debt, we hit that right when we should have. It's an all-in total cost of 2.24%. So we really hit the jackpot on issuing the debt in 2021.
Free money is good.
Yeah, and that series 2021 was just for capacity.
Very important.
There's no bond-funded replacement project.
No debt on that'll be repaid by operating.
Right.
That's
So
correct.
a blended average, if you had to put it for the 5.5 approximate million due in 2024, 4%, 5%?
In 2024, our weighted average cost of capital right now?
Yeah.
So if I were to do our weighted average cost of capital, it's 28 million for that. It's still, we're probably at like 3.6 to 3.7%.
Thank you.
Question?
Kish?
Can you comment? And I'm trying to link a couple of things together. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, oh, it looks like we're paying down our debt. And you said, provided that we don't have to issue any more debt.
Right.
Can you comment on this chart versus the floor and ceiling chart? Because I know that, in a couple of places, we are coming very, very close to our floor. And we've talked even about potentially having to revise what our policy is.
Mm-hmm.
So can you please comment on what you think the probability is that we will have to issue more debt given our current policy in place with the floor? Thank you.
So first thing to note, I think is the most important, is that our debt management policy actually says in the first paragraph, I believe, we will not issue debt unless we have to and unless market conditions are favorable. So sort of a last case is issuing debt. So we're looking at our 5-year financial plan right now. For the first 3 years, we're healthy. There's no reason for us to consider issuing debt. And honestly, the last time we issued debt in the replacement funds was when we did the reservoirs. So that was back in 1998.
Yeah, 98 is when we built this, so we issued that before that, or right around there, yeah.
Yeah, so 98 was the last time we actually issued debt that cost the ratepayers money. Since then, that debt's been paid off, at least the portion that related to replacement, and it's now all capacity fund. Because most of the reservoirs was capacity, some of it was replacement. So since 98, we haven't issued debt for replacement. We've been fine. In our next 3-year plan, it looks like we will have no need to issue debt, and a lot can happen in 2027. It's actually the 4th year. A lot can happen before then. We'd have to spend everything we have planned. Everything would have to happen the way we have it in here. And in our financial plan now, according to the forecast, we will be looking at potentially about $6 to $7 million in 2027. So it's 4 years from now. It's highly unlikely that will happen, that we'll have to issue that debt, and we will do everything we can not to have to issue. The only way we would consider it is if we got to that point and said, okay, our rates are really low. If they're 2.24% again, and it's favorable for ratepayers at that point, maybe we'll look at it. But if it's 5% plus, it wouldn't be a good option for us. Now, capacity is different. It's a different story. It's funded by developer fees and by debt. So if we spend a lot of money on capacity projects and it's low on funds, if we can't raise capacity fees, we have to issue debt. And usually we do those kind of in tandem. So we'll look at it and say, okay, what are the capacity fees? Can we raise them to cover this? We'll try to raise them and then potentially issue debt at the same time, or unless the fees cover the capacity projects. So that's our debt picture, and actually you can see it's looking pretty good. Right now we have a 407% debt service coverage ratio forecasted, and it's only going to get better because our debt service costs are only going to be $1.2 million by 2036. So that's pretty good, pretty impressive, I think. I don't know if it's a gold medal, but it's got to be close. So the next steps in the budget process, we're going to incorporate any changes from tonight into the recommended budget for fiscal year 2024. And then on June 7th, we will bring a recommended budget for adoption to the board. And that should be our finish line. So with that, if there are no questions, I'll see you on June 7th.
The investment, you said you had some good news, perhaps.
Yes, and we're actually, I don't want to, General Manager Pruitt wants to talk about it. I can or you can.
Yeah, why don't you do, I was going to talk about it in Sorry, I was gonna talk about it in the GM report, but we can talk about it now, it's timely.
Okay, so we've actually had discussions with both Chandler and Camp. So we've looked at different investment pools. There are a few of them. There's CalTrust, there's Camp, we have LAIF, and we have the San Diego County Investment Pool. The County Investment Pool, LAIF, Camp, and CalTrust are all sort of liquid portfolio options for us. Looking at those, Camp has the highest short-term return currently. Their 7-day return is 5.17%. And talking with Chandler, we've had discussions, and I actually told them I'd like to have them come out and present to the board to go over the investment policy, talk about what their restrictions are, the government code, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how it's functioning, and what their plan is for the future. So we've got plans to potentially send them more money depending on their strategy, and also invest money in Camp. So we want to do a combination of LAIF and Camp. LAIF is a little bit longer term duration, but has a shorter return. During COVID and other things, LAIF was a good place to have our liquid money because it was longer term, so it had a higher return. Camp would have been a horrible option because they would have been with the treasuries at 0%. But currently, Camp would be a good option to put most of it, a little bit in LAIF, and we can kind of transfer those accordingly. That's something we can do internally. The rest of our funds are with Chandler. A lot of it is tied up in investments, and they have set maturities. If they sell those, there are investment losses that they'll incur by selling them because the market pretty much equates itself. So in some ways they're locked in on those investments, but if we're able to send them more funds, they can put it in higher yielding investments, still within the restrictions of the investment policy, which they'll talk to you about. All of this is going to be talked about on June 7th, and as well as what actions we're taking in regards to it.
Thank you for the update, and I hope they can defend accepting a $50,000 a year fee and getting us a 2.3% return, because right now it's not really acceptable in my point of view.
Well, hopefully they're prepared. I did give them a heads up. I said they're going to have to defend themselves because they're not beating our savings account. So,
Bingo. Thank you.
All right, other questions? Yes.
Is this where you take notes about our budget requested items?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I have two requests. This meeting and the last meeting, we had the opportunity to see a bunch of children come in and talk to us about what they've learned about water. And I would very much like to continue that program. We had, we've piloted it at La Costa Meadows. We've piloted it again on a larger scale at Double Peak. And, we've seen that it can run in one classroom. We've seen that it can run pretty well in 3 classrooms. I'm interested, and I'm looking forward to hearing the feedback about the new way we did it this year. But, and we've had conversations, General Manager Pruitt and I, about, maybe we need to start talking about a budget for this program, because they come to us with asks, and it's very good for the community for us to be able to deliver. But, the trash grabbers cost money, and the rain barrels cost money. So I would like to put a placeholder in the budget that we continue to run that program and consider expanding it. I would very much like to see some of our historically underserved schools be able to take advantage of this program. And I would like to include that as part of the discussion. So maybe just a bookmark that, let's continue that program if we can. I'd like to see funds available for that program. My second ask is, we all know that there was an incident in San Marcos Youth Baseball Fields last week where someone with a gun fired a gun ostensibly from our parking lot, and a bullet hit one of the fields with children on the field. And I've been thinking about, well, what could we do as an agency to try to prevent something like that from happening again? And, I got the text from General Manager Pruitt about what had happened, and I drove over here that night, and I saw our sheriff's department using flashlights to look around in the bushes, and it was really dark. It was really dark in our parking lot. So I don't know how often people hang out in our parking lot that are unauthorized. I don't know the answer to that. But my feeling is that if we had lighting in our parking lot, we could deter something like that happening again, and we could have maybe a look at where the pockets are where it is dark, and make some provisions so that we can have a better lit parking lot and not have something like that happen again, at least exactly the way that it has happened before. So I would make that budget request. I have no idea how much it costs. I don't know. I didn't do a walk around before I came in, but there are places that are dark out there, and they do abut the baseball fields. So let's be a good neighbor, and try to make sure that we have enough lighting in that parking lot, and so that we can benefit from it, the community benefits from it, as well as San Marcos Youth Baseball. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe, thank you for that, if I can maybe respond. So to the first item on the Water Leadership Program, the budget that was presented does include money to continue the program at another school. It does not accelerate the program, so we didn't include 2 or 3 schools. It's still expanding it 1 school at a time. The asks that they have, they're pretty minimal, with the exception of provide recycled water. That would be millions of dollars, right? So that's different, but the trash grabbers and the rain barrels and those types of things, no problem. We have enough money in the budget to do that, and we will follow up with Double Peak, make sure we get those things to them. Regarding the lighting, what I would suggest is maybe the Assistant General Manager, myself, and Ed get together and do an assessment of the lighting in the parking lot, identify areas where there may be room for improvement. I don't think we'll be able to do that in time for this budget, but if we do an assessment and find out that additional lighting is needed, we can come forward in like mid-year for a budget adjustment if we think it's appropriate. I don't. Yeah.
I got a little update on that. If you
Oh,
want.
awesome, thank you.
So one of the problems we have on site is we don't have any electric circuits left, so we can't put up anything high-powered because we just don't have the electricity, the grid, our services are full. But one of the things that we're doing with one of our consultants, Terra Verde, is looking at for electrification of our fleet, but looking at our infrastructure needs. Part of that, working with Matthias and IT, is additional camera and lighting is also considered that. So once we know what our electrical loads are going to need to be for our future, we're building in lighting, cameras, and other things. We didn't look at it from a lighting, from a security standpoint, we look at the cameras from it, but that's easily, we could roll that into that scope, no problem.
Thank you for that, and let's hurry.
Yeah, well, was it positively determined that the shots came from here?
No, they do not believe it came from our site, but they wanted to review our site just in case. They think it came from the main road in front on Armor Light.
I still think it's,
Okay.
I still think it's a great idea to improve the lighting, regardless of where it came from.
So I was also here that evening, and I talked with several of the deputies, and interesting, one of them, they were disappointed that we didn't have sound on our cameras, because it helps them to identify the shot, and if you have multiple cameras, they said they may be able to better locate where it came from.
Triangulate.
Ours are just video only, but that's something we can look at as well. And our cameras are designed to protect our property. They don't really get a good view of the public rights-of-way outside. That's something we can look at, maybe putting another camera on the corner, looking at the approach, who's trying to get into our property, not who's already on our property. So we can look into that.
Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Any further questions? All right, this is an information-only item, so we'll move on to 2.4, approval of professional service agreement for the audit service.
Yeah, and this is a quick item. I'll just turn this over to Wes, so I don't need to steal any of his thunder.
Good evening again. So on March 22nd, 2023, we sent out requests for proposals for audit firms. Our current auditors have been our auditors for 5 years now, and even though the state regulations actually say you can extend audit firms for up to 6 or 7 years, I think it's 6 years, but the requirement there is typically if they switch partners on the engagement. So usually it's best practices to go 5 years, then change unless the auditor actually switches the partner on the engagement and potentially the manager or other staff. But we went out, we actually sent out the RFP to audit firms. We got 3 proposals. Staff reviewed those proposals and actually interviewed all 3 firms. And based on the interviews, we've actually selected the Poon Group, accountants and advisors, as auditors that are being recommended tonight for approval. The fiscal impact would be, over the 3 years, the cost would be $78,818 for the 3 years of audit costs, and that's actually $2,782 lower than we would pay our current auditors. So there was a little bit of savings to be had there. All the firms, all 3 of them, had pretty much the same bids. Costs were pretty much the same. So this recommendation is based off interviews, their experience, their references, and other items of the like.
And just to be clear, that was the Poon Group, not the Pruum Group.
That was my question.
P-U-N.
Did I say that it sounded like Pruum?
It kind of did.
It's Poon, it's P-U-N, Poon Group.
Okay. Any questions? Entertain a motion to approve the professional agreement.
So moved.
And a second?
Secondly.
Very good. Please vote. And it passes unanimously.
So Glenn, you'll be auditing us now.
Yes. Very suspicious.
All right.
Just a little bit.
All right. General Manager's report.
Yeah, two quick items. The first one, Wes already touched on, June 7th, the investment advisors will be here, so have all your questions ready. They know to be prepared. They know they're under the gun, but we can do better than we have been doing in our investment portfolio. The second item, there's a critical project that we have, a CIP project that's going to be under construction next Wednesday night, I believe it is. So we have the sewer bypass project, and it connects to the land outfall within Melrose Drive in Carlsbad, right? So the project that we're putting in is replacing a line, but we need to tie into the existing line. And that line is the sewer siphon in the main outfall. We can't really shut off the sewage in it. So we're gonna be doing the work at night. We're gonna be, because that's when the flows are the lowest in the outfall. And we're gonna be diverting as much flow through LS1 to get, minimize the flows through there. And we're gonna be providing a 6 to 8 hour window that we can actually break into that line, put in the new connecting line and a valve. Hopefully the work is successful, we tie it in, shut the valve, and then we can go back to situation normal while they construct the rest of the bypass line. So it's a big moment in that project. That project's been underway for several months now. A lot of delays because of weather, right? It's hard to dig when it's raining that much, but big moment. We'll do some test stuff on Tuesday night, but I think the work is the evening of Wednesday, Thursday, right? It's the Wednesday, Thursday time? Yeah,
That
so
could be
next week.
over.
Yeah, it's one of those keep your fingers crossed and other things that, because if there's an oops in that moment, it's a big oops.
Oops.
But, yeah, so we're doing everything we can with the conditions that we have to minimize the chance of an oops out there. That's all. I have.
Yes, Eric.
Recant the location again?
Yeah, so it's right on Melrose Drive. The work is in Melrose, so there will be some traffic impacts, but the work's gonna be overnight. We don't envision that the traffic impacts will be big, but there will be lane closures. It's right where that canyon that kind of runs by Carrillo Elementary. There's a canyon right where that, and the outfall runs along the south bank of that canyon that runs through there. So it's right where the south kind of shore of that canyon intersects with Melrose Drive.
It's actually a little bit south of there, so kind of coming down that hill.
Yeah.
So that's where the road will.
Roughly that vicinity, a little south of Carrillo Elementary.
Got it. And services affected for customers?
No
None.
service.
Thank you.
All right, anything further?
That's all I have.
Then legal counsel.
Thank you. Just a couple items. The first one is on a statewide initiative that qualified for the ballot in 2022. It's the Taxpayers Protection and Government Accountability Act. It sounds real good, but it asserts that it's going to amend Proposition 218 and Prop 26. And the effect of it would be a negative manner on our ability under 218 relative to rates and charges. One of the things to think about is we're currently able to use non-rate funds, or we have an ability to use non-rate funds to affect an affordability component of our rates. This would eliminate that ability because it's going to restrict our fees to actual costs of those rates, so you couldn't use that money to offset. It would have a negative impact there. The other negative impact of the initiative for us is it would change the standard currently applicable to 218 challenges. Currently, we bear the burden of showing that our rates meet 218 by a preponderance of the evidence, which is a slight tip of the scale. It changes it to a clear and convincing standard, which would be a greater burden for public agencies in terms of its 218 challenges in the 218 litigation that has become so prevalent in California since the Orange County case. So that's set for the November 2024 ballot. The League of Cities is currently soliciting resolutions from its member agencies. I suspect Aqua and CSDA will begin to solicit those, and it may be something you want to consider supporting. The other item relate, and it's just kind of a plug, if anyone's headed home and hasn't had dinner, I have some friends who lost a child to heart disease, and Rady's is doing Pizza with a Purpose tonight. So if you know anyone or anyone wants to run by and pick up a pizza, they're donating 20% of all their sales today in San Diego County to Rady's Hospital for the Hospital Heart Institute down at Rady's, which is California Pizza Kitchen. I didn't mention, I got to give them a plug. California Pizza Kitchen, it's Pizza with a Purpose night. So great program if you're hungry and want to grab a pizza.
Very good.
I have a
Yes.
question. First, condolences. That's thank you for sharing that news, and I'm sorry to hear it. The bills that you talked about, and maybe it's too early, but your professional opinion is the upshot that it's going to raise rates for our customers.
I don't know what effect it will have on the rates. It's going to raise probably challenges to the rates done by agencies, which in result is going to raise fees. And anybody knows in 218 litigation, it's just a merry-go-round. The people who recover the fees then increase the rates at the agency that then get paid back by all the ratepayers anyway. So yes, ultimately.
Very good. Water Authority?
Yeah, as was mentioned in the budget presentation, there was a budget workshop at the Water Authority yesterday. It's the last workshop they're holding. Next week's the regular May board meeting. It's kind of the last look at the draft budget before it's up for approval in June. And, you know, we talked about the potential rate increase. I'm not really a betting person, but it's not going to be over 10%. The city has made it clear that they will not vote on anything double digits. So, you know, I'm thinking what we have in there is conservative as far as 10%. I look to see it end up somewhere around 9%. So.
Very good. Encina Wastewater, our board meeting is in the upcoming week, so we'll have a report then. Standing committees?
You had a capital meeting this morning too at EWA, didn't you?
Oh, yes, we had the capital committee meeting. Primarily, pretty light meeting. We had the update on the digester 6, they're improving that. We also talked about the, what the heck was it? The SCADA implementation on the effluent building and the odor control projects that are taking place at the district. So I think those were the 3 items of any consequence. Again, they're coming back to the board here in the next week or so. Directors' reports on meeting and conferences and seminars. I know we all attended, so starting down the line, with ladies first.
I will be very quick. I attended the a communications committee meeting and one of the roundtables about talking about drought. And I think that those comments are, I'll bring those up in the P3. They were really, really interesting. You know, the roundtables that they've offered the last couple of times have offered great insight into best practices that other agencies are doing. And, you know, that's the whole reason why we go, is to learn what other agencies are doing and to network. And so I will reserve those comments, but I attended Aqua Spring 2023. It was a great conference. I learned a lot. So I will let my colleagues explain about what they learned.
Very good.
Me?
Yes.
Okay, well, I attended the conference as well, obviously. Monday, I attended the Aqua JPIA Board of Directors meeting as the district's alternate representative. The major action for that board meeting was the election of 4 executive committee members. It's a 9-member board, so 4 seats were up. One of the 4 that we elected was an incumbent, so it made 3 new executive committee members. Tuesday, I attended the Energy Committee. was dominated by discussion on the recently enacted CARB clean fleet regulations. I didn't really hear anything new, just a lot of complaining about trying to meet that new regulation. But I also attended that same day the Water Management Committee. There was a great presentation on the proposed Sites Reservoir, which has been talked about as a project probably for at least 2 decades, if not more. Maybe Ed knows. And so one of the interesting things was the fact that if it had been built in time for this wet year, they could have captured 500,000 acre-feet of water and stored it, so that water basically went to the ocean. They're looking to do environmental work in the water right application with the State Water Board in the coming year. Both of those they're looking to have done by the end of 2024. So again, there won't be a shovel in the ground until probably 2025. Very disappointing, the lack of progress.
Yeah.
The other thing I talked about was the upcoming 2024 general election. There's a lot of polling done, and there's public support for a big water bond. The public seems to like to vote for those, although projects don't get built. But they say there's an appetite for a $15 to $18 billion water bond, so we'll see how that goes. Wednesday, I attended this statewide issues forum on water conveyance, and that was dominated by the discussion on that subsidence on the various aqueducts in the state. And all told, the various projects to fix this ground subsidence issues, basically they're due to groundwater overdraft over the last 100 years or so. But there's basically about $3 billion worth of projects that need to be done to fix the subsidence issues. Thursday, I attended a finance program on affordability, and the consensus there is that California needs help from the federal government. The ratepayer can't afford all these multi-billion-dollar projects to fix everything. So that's what I did.
Very good. Eric?
Yeah, I echo that sentiment of attending the panels and hearing that there's this bond that's to be proposed for this large sum of money, and the disappointment that ratepayers and taxpayers should rightfully have for a lot of these projects not getting done. I was really shocked to find out how much or how little was spent of the last bond in creating these storage facilities that would have made a massive change over the last year alone. And the other kind of things that I learned from the conference was verification that we are getting hosed in our investment returns right now, but many others are as well. So maybe I opened up some other districts' eyes to reevaluating their situation. But not only that, but perhaps reevaluating our retirement program and aligning that. There's opportunities to make all of the employees more money and save on fees and such that are passed on to us, worthy of exploration, as well as exploring new technologies. So we heard a pitch from a gentleman to perhaps do text messaging services to let ratepayers know when their bills are due, or things of this nature that I'll be bringing up to the P3 committee for review. And it was a great conference. I was feeling more confident in my water abilities, and it's great to connect with peers, and looking forward to perhaps trying to apply for a panel next year and represent the district in that manner.
Very good. I too attended, and I attended a couple that's already been mentioned, but progressive design build. It's kind of new, but it's becoming a little more used. Only the reason for that is that the client can stay in the process throughout the whole length of the process. And if things are not going correctly, there is potential contract language that can give you an off-ramp so that you don't have to continue down a bad road. There's about a $5 million beginning level that it makes sense. So we'll see. I don't know if we got anything coming up like that, but it'll be interesting to watch. Let's see. Any other things? Other business? The Urban Water Institute has its annual conference in August at the Hyatt Regency in San Diego. And item next, future agenda items. All right, and with that, I think we're adjourned.